Michael Rafferty and Terry Lynn McClintock lured, abducted, and tortured 8-year-old Tori Stafford on April the 8th, 2009. Saul David Betesh, Robert Cribbs, and Joseph Woods lured and tortured 12-year-old Emmanuel Jacks to their apartment on the long weekend of July the 29th, 1977. Calvin Hoover assaulted, tortured, and murdered 9-year-old Christine Jessup in 1984. But for decades, another man was wrongfully arrested and imprisoned, and it wasn't until the DNA technology finally ruled him out, and he actually did time for Hoover's crime. By the time that the DNA actually matched, first this person was wrongfully imprisoned, and then they still didn't know whose DNA it was, even though they knew it wasn't the wrongfully imprisoned man. So during the pandemic, after Calvin Hoover transpired, they finally were able to get a sample of his DNA. Not that they ever suspected him, but it cleared him. It actually clicked him in as the actual culprit in the Christine Jessup case. These are just a few of the very horrific cases that I have actually discussed at length during the earlier days of my channel. Feel free to refer back to those videos if you are interested in finding out more about those details. Antisocial behaviors have been around for centuries, but it's only been since modern ages that such individuals as dangerous as these psychopathic killers were actually labeled as such and segregated from the rest of society. So before that, the psychopaths were actually integrated into society with the rest of us because they were never properly or fully identified. Not all antisocial behaviors clearly indicate a psychotic breakdown, but there are a group of negative behaviors that are pretty good to watch out for. channel. Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. And I am really sorry about the way I have been hiding and relaxing, not really doing much online these days, because I have been actually the past 2.5 weeks or so, I've been getting over a slight bladder infection. And I noticed that around 10 years ago, the same thing happened after I finished my lemonade cleanse. About a month or two afterwards, not long after I did the lemonade cleanse. And I happened to be in Italy at the time, so luckily it didn't. I remember spending my birthday in Venice under attack with a bladder infection all of a sudden, and it was not fun. Thankfully, there's no pain involved. That infection was much worse at the time, but this one is pretty slight, and I've been taking about 4 of these a day, but if it doesn't pass completely, I'm gonna have to go on a round of antibiotics. I haven't had an infection in about 2-3 years. So it was 10 years ago and 3 years ago. So yeah, it's not fun. I'm a little worried why they keep recurring. But other than that, I'm feeling okay. No complications at all. But, sometimes that doesn't mean anything. And so tonight I am finally delivering the little discussion on the psychological profile of a psychotic killer, such as those in the cases I mentioned above. And so I wanted to deliver this content originally right after completing the Ford Hotel review. But since I was going on to review the case of the Valentine killer, I decided to put it off until now. So I really, I'm trying not to review the cases that are very upsetting or are actually still cold. There are a few other cold cases out there that I still have to look into. But for now, we're going to simply just deal with the ones that I've been speaking to you about in the past. And so these are the signs that I've researched. And so what do Michael Rafferty, Terry Lynn McClintock, Saul David Betesh, Robert Cribbs, Joseph Woods, Calvin Hoover, John Macbeth, Finlayson, and Harvey Hawley all have in common? What could that be? Certainly, that would be a horrific case of child abuse or some sort of trauma. They were all confronted with the misfortune and painful incident of childhood. And so this was especially the case for Calvin Hoover, who spent a lifetime trying to contact his biological father, so I'm assuming he was adopted. And John Macbeth Finlayson was not sane. And I have to tell you that with John Macbeth's case, he was not found guilty because of his insanity. And it's so tragic. And so he had a horrific childhood, and he liked to take his rage out on children. And that is why Kirkland Deasley met with his fate, because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong person. Although the disease that we are discussing today is essentially instilled in the human mind, and adults too can get it, it's really instilled in the human mind in early childhood. Now, adults can suffer severe trauma as well, and shock. and not know how to cope or deal with it properly sometimes. And they will too develop the behavioral symptoms that I am going to describe to you. First, a disclaimer. Now, I myself do not know how to identify or judge such behaviors. My discussion is based on research. That is the outward evidence, the personality traits, picking up on them, is often best left to the psychiatric experts, and I am not that. So I am going to simply do my best to clearly describe them as I found them in my research. And so there are essentially 6 signs of a potential psychotic killer. And so I'm going to give them to you one by one. And so number 1, this one is a very apparent sign that will be it will be aligned with outward violence and extreme violent behavior that is revealed in various very negative acts and deeds. And so these could include highly rebellious and irresponsible behavior leading to extreme violence, such as kidnapping, extortion, blackmail, stalking, and assault. Stalking is a big one because it's very common. And I know a lot of people complain about being stalked, and yet it's very hard to pinpoint exactly, just as I said before, what is the behavior all about. Why is that person always there beside that other person? Is it really a stalking incident? Well, sometimes we can, analyze and dissect stalking a little bit too much and not pay enough attention to the consequences. And so, I would say stalking is the most common and most universal and should be treated very, very seriously by authorities. Is it? Number 2, another even more evil and criminal behavior is a shameless lack of regard for both the quality of human life and human life itself. And so I'm talking about elimination, and the process of elimination comes through the behaviors that are outlined in number 1. And so that includes a persistent and relentless pursuit of the victim for months and weeks on end. This is why stalking and targeting should be treated as a criminal matter, and not what a law official once said to me: can't do anything until you end up in a morgue. Cheers. Well, in Japan, it takes 20 minutes for law enforcement to come knocking. Well, not in North America, right? Number 3, this one is directly related to the abused inner child. And the aggressor can absolutely mask a totally sane face while struggling intensely with inner turmoil and appear so unassuming, innocent, but actually be so cunning and conniving. The aggressor can also hide a variety of other personality disorders like narcissism and split personality. Flip side, number 4 shows that the aggressor can also charm the socks off of you and earn your trust in minutes, moments even, and also be very able to act in the highest moral faith. So, that's like night and day, isn't it? Number 5. Now, this next description is actually loaded, and broken down into a subset of 11 other negative characteristic traits that are not always construed as psychotic behavior, even antisocial behavior, not completely. Egocentrism, chronic lying, impulsivity, disregard for safety, indifference to punishment, and lack of remorse. Lack of coherent or realistic goals. You know, the big picture, well, it's just not there. Callous traits, and a grandiose and overinflated sense of self-worth. Lastly, there is a persistent weaponization of words, and speech ultimately will expose the true criminal nature of the perpetrator. The current criminals in the cases that I did review showed a psychotic break at varied levels. And for example, violence in the cold case of Donna and Wendy far, far outweighs that of Colleen and Elizabeth, although the tragic end results were virtually the same. They were all transpired. Donna and Wendy, however, were absolutely tortured and viciously brutalized. And then on top of all that, shot. So there's a big imbalance between one crime and the other. However, both showed a variety of antisocial and psychotic behaviors. And I just don't understand. It's been, you know, a good couple of weeks that I have not been able to stay awake longer than 9 or 10 p.m. I don't know what's wrong. I have very little energy and I'm sleepy tired all the time. And so I know that I'm fighting, I can sense that I'm fighting some kind of infection, but I had those symptoms for the longest time. And on that day that I finally realized I had a bladder infection, I had an icy cold slush, and I stepped in a very deep puddle, and so my feet were soaked. And I also had some dairy, and so I think maybe that dairy, because that's how it became a full-blown bladder infection in Venice, after I had ice cream, and Florence too. I noticed that tension, you know, in your bladder. It's not a good thing to talk about, but you know, you all know what I'm talking about. When you have a bladder infection, you can tell that something's different. So I think it was a combination of those things, the icy cold slush and dairy. It just didn't do anything for me, really. And so now I'm sick. Hope that you enjoyed this content and understand that this behavior that I've been discussing is extremely difficult for us to recognize and analyze at face value. Thanks very much for listening and watching. Bye.